What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we are talking about the best steels for knives. Now, this is obviously a very controversial topic, right? Everybody has their favorites, everybody uh, thinks that they have the answer. I will give you my thought process behind picking my favorite steels. I will give you my three favorite steels, but obviously everybody has their own opinion, and I anticipate that this will probably be uh, controversial, right? Everybody has. This is a topic that kind of elicits very strong emotions in people. So what you see here uh, is, oh, before I get started, I want to tell you that I'm going to answer the question about the best steel with the understanding that there's other things that go into how a blade performs, right? If you look at uh, edge geometry, if you look at heat treatment, those things are as important. Some people think they're more important than the actual steel. But here we're going to be tackling the question of the steel by itself. Okay, we're going to isolate the steel. And the reason I'm going to isolate the steel is because it's very hard. It's very hard to find, the same knife with the same blade shape, with the same manufacturer, with the same everything, and then evaluate the steel, right? So, what we're gonna do here, we're just gonna be talking about the steel. I understand there's other things that go into it, uh, but right now we're just basically we're saying all things being equal, what is the best steel? Now, the data chart that you see here, I I kind of reorganized, but I borrowed the data from Knife Steel Nerds. And Knife Steel Nerds, if you don't know, his name's Dr. Laren Thomas. I think he's the one behind this behind this website, and he has a PhD in metallurgy. He is the one that kind of developed Magna Cut. He has a book called Knife Engineering that is it has all the information you can possibly want about knives and steels. Uh, and what he does is he takes steel blanks and he treats them according to correct specifications, and he tests the blanks. And I think this is probably the best source for data as far as steel is concerned. Um, some people, Cedric and Ada or Super Steel Steve, they test knives with certain steels, and well, I think that's valuable as well, right? To understand, hey, is Rick Hinder better at heat treating than Spyderco or Benchmade or those kinds of things. I think if you're just looking at the steel itself, I think that Dr. Thomas is probably the way to go. So all of the information that I'm going to present to you here is I've reorganized a lot of his data in a way that it was more helpful for me, okay, and hopefully it's more helpful for you. So the chart that you see here is the information that he gathered, and if you know about steel or if you don't, steel basically has three attributes: edge retention, toughness, and corrosion resistance. I think corrosion resistance is fairly self-explanatory. It's the ability of a steel to resist rust, right, or to withstand being in a humid or wet environment, right? Edge retention is basically if you're cutting a lot with your knife, how long will the edge last, without you having to resharpen. Toughness is more defined as the ability to to kind of withstand lateral forces. When people say that a knife is chippy, that it chips easily, it usually represents a low toughness. If If you put any lateral force in the knife and it breaks, then that's a lack of toughness. Uh, Toughness has a little bit more flexibility. Okay, it's what that means. So what he has done is he's assigned a grade to each steel. And so, for example, if you take 1095, he gives it a grade of 4.5 in toughness, 1.5 in edge retention, and 0 corrosion resistance. So the first column here, the first group of data that I call total, is basically I'm adding up all of those three attributes, right? The 4.5, the 1.5, that gives you your 6. And so if you're just looking for kind of the ones that have the most of all three, you're looking towards the bottom of the chart, right? And I think it's safe to say that probably your better steals are going to be down here towards the bottom of this chart, uh, or the bottom of this table. But if you're somebody that just needs the very best edge retention, right? If you don't really care about toughness, if you live in a controlled environment and you're just processing cardboard inside an air-conditioned room, then maybe you don't care about corrosion resistance. In that case, you're looking at edge retention, and this I've sorted by the not the steels that have the most edge retention down towards the bottom. Uh, Same with toughness. This is kind of toughness priority table here, and this is corrosion resistance priority table. Again, if you live, uh, if you work on a boat, if you are in human environments, if you live in a swamp, if your knife is in your pocket and you're in hot environments and it'll cause you to sweat, then you're looking at something here. But even when I compiled this table, I found that this wasn't particularly helpful to me. So what I did is I graphed it, right? And the first graph that I did is the total graph, right? Obviously, uh, bigger graphs towards the right, right? And what I've done is in purple you see toughness, in green you see edge retention, and in gray you see corrosion resistance, right? So you can see how much of each steel has, right? But even then, even this chart didn't really help me all that much. And the idea for this type of a chart I got from Creeley Blades. Creeley Blades, he experiments with kind of your kind of fancier steels, your S125s, your um, and those kinds of things, your X121s, those kinds of steels. So he generated something similar to this. So the idea of stacking bars on top of each other, I got from him. But even this table wasn't very helpful to me. What I decided to do was to make it so this is the edge retention kind of graph, right? So if you see the green is edge retention, and obviously towards the right side of the graph, it just keeps going up and up and up and up, right? So what I recommend you do is if you have a steel that you like, okay, and I'm just gonna not that I don't I'm okay with S30V, but it's something that a lot of people can have access to. But if you're at S30V and you like the edge retention of S30V, right, and you're looking for a better steel, well, you might be looking for something at this level or to the right of this, right? All of those steels you can expect, if everything works for your knife and the heat treatment and all of that is done correctly, you can expect it to get a better performance out of your steel towards the right of the chart, right? Or you can even say, hey, at S30V, this amount of edge retention is enough for me. So which steels provide more of something else, right? So if you look at this, M390 or 20CV obviously have a higher total, but at least that level of edge retention, right? You get your S110V, you get your S90V, M398, all of this towards that are to the right of S30V and above this line right here are steels that I would probably consider better than S30V, right? So I think looking at this was a lot more helpful to me to visualize what was important to me. Okay, and again, I'm gonna actually give you my favorite steals here towards the end, uh, but I want you to have this information so that you can make a kind of a your own decision, right? And then we have kind of the same thing here for corrosion resistance, right? You go from steels with zero corrosion resistance, and then you go up and up and up, right, towards your Vanex and your LC200N with the best corrosion resistance. Again, if you're looking for something, if you're looking for something that has a minimum corrosion resistance, then you pick that knife, right? If you again S30V, anything to the right of S30V is going to have better corrosion resistance than S30V, and the same thing with toughness, right? And one of the reasons that I really like looking at this chart is, or these charts, right? The edge retention, the corrosion resistance, and toughness chart, is because it gives you an explanation as to some of the decisions that some knife makers do, right? For example, I know that Winkler Knives uses 80 CRV2, right? Right here. And you can see how far to the right. So it's a very tough, very tough steel. It has no corrosion resistance, none. But you can see what he's thinking, right? He says, well, it's one of the toughest knife steels out there. It has no corrosion resistance, so I'm gonna coat my blades. So all of Winkler knives are coated. So you start to understand a little bit of what they do. For example, you understand that if that that 1095, you see SC using a lot of 1095 in their steels, and because it has zero corrosion resistance, that's why they coat all of their blades, you know? So this also helps you understand, like, why don't they just make every knife out there, in M390? Well, you can see kind of why, right? So, uh, so these are the charts, and my decision making is going to be kind of based on my own personal experience, okay? But I will give you kind of my thought process and my experience with these, right? But I am gonna cheat just a smidge. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you my top three steals for folders and my top three steals for fixed blades. And those are different. And let me tell you why. When I'm looking at a folder, right? When I'm looking at a folder, I'm not gonna be doing a lot of very heavy duty work with it, right? It's more of an EDC. I do, food preparation. I open packages. I process cardboard. I cut some random little thing, right? But I'm not. I don't need a very strong knife. So I want something that uh, probably sacrifices a little bit of toughness, uh, but something that has decent edge retention, and I do want some corrosion resistance. I do work in construction, so I do go out onto the field, and my blade does get humid. Uh, and I also I live in a humid environment, so I want kind of a certain amount of corrosion resistance. I certainly can't go with kind of a zero corrosion resistance type of knife. So that all of that said, my number three knife is Vanex. So, Vanex has kind of the edge retention close to the edge retention of an S30V blade, right? With a little more toughness and a lot more corrosion resistance, right? And this is when I want to just not worry about my blade. If I'm gonna be in a humid environment, I think Vanex is the one is the one steel that I kind of worry about the least, right? It's uh, I think it's I think it's very it keeps my mind at ease, right? I'm not kind of worried about something's gonna happen. I don't feel like I have to rush home and dry out my knife and disassemble it and oil it and all that stuff, right? I think MagnaCut was a close fourth. It's a little less. It has a little bit less edge retention, a little more toughness, and about the same corrosion resistance. But I think for my folder, I think Vanax is probably is at my number three. Okay, and then at my number two, it's a little bit boring, but it's boring for a reason. We're looking at M390 20CV or 204P, however you want to call it. So again, more edge retention than S30V with about as much toughness. You sacrifice a little bit of toughness in exchange for more edge retention, and in my folder I'm willing to make that trade. I think there's a reason M390 is so highly rated, right? I do like M398, and that's kind of a subset. It's a lot more edge retention in exchange for toughness. But M398 is hard to come by. There's not a lot of knives with M398. I have my Herman knife Sting has it, but not a lot of knives have it. So even though I do like it, it's probably kind of a fringe steel. So that's my number two, M390 20CV. It's popular for a reason. I think it's a great steel. And my favorite steel for folder is S90V. And S90V for me has the the amount of corrosion resistance that I want, as kind of a minimum. It has an okay toughness, not great, but again, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of toughness for uh, for edge retention, right? And I think if you look at the bar chart of M390, few steels have equal or more. S110V is kind of there, Vanax is kind of there, MagnaCut, and LC200N. But again, for my folder, I am looking uh, for for something that has I make edge retention a priority in my folder. So at number three we got Vanax. At number two we got M390, and at number one S90V is my favorite steel for my pocket knife. Now for my fixed blades, then we're looking at toughness becomes a lot more important. My fixed blades, I do a lot of heavier duty tasks with my fixed blades. I do I baton with my fixed blades. I do wood processing. I take him out camping. I try. I Yeah. I don't baby my knives. So toughness becomes a lot more important, and a lot more important than edge retention, and a lot more important than corrosion resistance. Uh, in corrosion resistance, I think it's much easier to wipe a blade that has gotten wet when it's a fixed blade than when it is a folder, right? If you get one of your folders wet, you'd have to kind of disassemble the knife, pivot, scale screws, get the pivot dry, make sure that there's no water between the washers. There's a lot involved in getting your pocket knife dry, right? But as far as a fixed blade, if you've got a full tank blade, heck, you just wipe it, oil it, you're done. So corrosion resistance is not as important to me uh, in in my fixed blade. So with all of that said, my number three steel for fixed blade is Screwwear. Okay, obviously one of the best you know at toughness. You know, uh, kind of a middling to low edge retention, really. and decent enough corrosion resistance. So again, in my fixed blade, Cruwear, I mean toughness is kind of my priority, and I think Cruwear does a very good job of uh, of giving me what I want. I have a couple fixed blades in Cruwear. I bought my Bravo One in Cruwear, one of my favorite blades, and I wanted it in one of my favorite steels. So uh, number three, Cruwear. Number two, kind of the newer kid on the block, MagnaCut. And MagnaCut, again, so a little bit less tough than your Cruwear, but it's such a kind of a well-rounded steel, right? Because it has a lot more edge retention and a lot more corrosion resistance than Cruwear. That's why I think that even though I know it's toughness priority, but I think that the downgrade in toughness from here to here is slight enough that what you gain is just a lot, right? So for example, Vanax, you have to sacrifice a lot of toughness to make this jump in corrosion resistance and edge retention, right? But I feel like from Cruwear to MagnaCut, you downgrade a little bit, but you gain so much. So I think MagnaCut is just a great steel uh, for both folders and fixed plates. But in my case, in my top three, MagnaCut makes it at number two, right? Really good steel. And then if you follow my channel for any amount of time, you know uh, my favorite steel for fixed blade is 3V. Okay, again, uh, basically towards it's second to last in toughness. So very tough steel, and more edge retention than what you get in, well, about the same that you get in kind of a Cruwear, uh, and then decent corrosion resistance up here. Is just a very tough steel that works great for fixed blades. I think you'd be hard pressed to find uh, kind of a better steel for fixed blades. Um, I think, for example, something like ABL. I don't have a lot of experience with ABL, but so here, and I still would think so. They have kind of the same total amount of attributes here. So you sacrifice some corrosion resistance for edge retention. I think I would still prefer the 3V in this case. I've never used Z-Tough. I put it in the chart just because it's the one that kind of was the toughest of them all. Uh, in case you see something and you want the information, so I'm presenting it to you here. But I think, for example, and I've had an LC200N in the quiet carry current, and that's the problem is that my fixed blades I use for a lot of heavier duty tasks, and the current is kind of a thinner, skinning, smaller blade. So it's not the typical use that I do for my fixed blades. So if I manage to find a blade, that suits my needs better, LC200 and I think could give 3V a run for its money. A little bit less toughness, a little bit less edge retention, but a lot more corrosion resistance. So even though I'm not too worried about the corrosion, I mean, it's nice to have. I'm not going to sneeze at it, right? So to recap, top three steels for fixed blades. At number three, Cruwear. At number two, MagnaCut. And at the very top, 3V. And my top three steel for EDC for my folders. At number three, Vanax. At number two, M390. And at number one, S90V. So hopefully this has been informative to you guys. Feel free to screenshot this stuff uh, and use it for for your own purposes. Um, And if you like it and you enjoyed it, then like and subscribe. Don't hit the notification button. I always say it. Nobody likes to get more emails about anything. And until I see you at the next one, take care.